No.
Whoa!
Hey my fellow friends, it's Chris from Shughead Gaming, and here's my review for The Climb 2, developed and published by Crytek and releasing for the time being exclusively for the Oculus Quest and Quest 2 this March 4th, 2021, for an approximate price of $30. But of course, that depends on your region. This review was done on the Quest 2. The Climb 2 is exactly what it sounds like, a game about climbing stuff. Basically a virtual climbing wall across some of the most beautiful vistas in the world. The Climb 2 doubles down on everything that worked in the first title, but this time optimized to bring its brand of vertigo-inducing thrills solely to the Quest platform. The first Climb was a standout VR title, especially on the PC, so stick with me as we go through the Climb 2 while I tear it apart and see how it stands up. As always guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button. It not only helps out my channel, but VR gaming as a whole. And if you'd like to see more VR content from me, please consider subscribing. And for video updates, make sure you hit that bell icon. And one more quick shout out guys, I've started another channel called the Virtual Boys Podcast with Ryan from the VR Grid. Over on that channel, we do weekly conversations about the things that affect us the most in VR. So check us out there or on any major podcast services. Let's kick things off with a look at graphics. The Climb 2 coming from Crytek was always going to be a good-looking game. Running on the aptly named CryEngine, this is a game engine that in its 5th iteration has been responsible for such visually stunning games as Crysis Remastered, Hunt Showdown, and the more relevant titles Robinson the Journey and the first Climb game that came out on both the PC and Quest platform. The first Climb, being the real reference point here, was a visual masterpiece on the PC when it first launched back in 2016. And it still stands today as a visual standout for VR. The Climb would see a port to the Quest a few years later, and while it was impressive for the hardware, it certainly lacked some of the wow factor and immersiveness of the PC version. However, in what I feel is a poor decision, the Climb 2 now releases solely for the Quest platform, as Oculus continues to focus primarily on the standalone market. I say poor decision because, having played both the Quest and PC versions of the first Climb, the PC version was simply a more potent experience, due entirely to its improved visuals, particularly in the areas of lighting, sharpness, and draw distance, all areas that significantly impacted the sense of realism as well as height, one of the Climb's most critical components in selling its experience. Fortunately, the Climb 2, with the extra power of the Quest 2 and running on a revised version of the CryEngine, is a significant improvement over the prior Quest outing, bringing to the table most of the advanced lighting effects from the PC version of the first game, and actually improving on them in some areas, as is demonstrated best in the sequel's few night stages. Levels here in the Climb 2 simply feel more organic, realistic, and, well, interesting. This is largely due to the dynamic lighting effects that bathe each and every stage, but are also greatly impacted by improved texture detail and maybe most importantly a large focus on making these levels feel alive, with the welcomed inclusion of cameos by all assortment of wildlife. Just don't get too close to the snakes. Ugh. And while many of the game's levels certainly tread similar territory to the first game's locations, here revisited locations really highlight the dev team's effort to make climbs much more interesting and visually dynamic, with the inclusion of more man-made objects in the game world. Ladders, zip lines, ropes, and climbable structures litter these new maps and really help to keep things fresh. Standout being the very welcomed inclusion of the downtown cityscape level, which adds a totally new dynamic to the game. Unfortunately, not all is perfect here, as despite the obvious improvements to the visuals here in the sequel, it is still very evident that even on the Quest 2, the hardware is certainly being pushed to its limits. Most evident in the rather aggressive foveated rendering at play that sees the resolution drop sharply outside of what you see straight ahead. A tactic used frequently in VR games to lessen the demand on the hardware. This isn't surprising, but it's quite noticeable at times here, going as far as to even slightly cause a warp effect when scanning off into the large vistas around you. Much less an issue when actually climbing, this certainly isn't game-breaking, but it sure does hurt the immersion. Other graphical shortcomings like low poly rock textures, flat backgrounds, aliasing issues, and some very obvious pop-in all contribute to the feeling the Quest is struggling to pull this off. But it does, and despite its graphical shortcomings, the Climb 2 impresses in the headset. I won't lie, these issues did hurt the immersion factor, and never let me forget I was playing a video game, but neither did they hurt the fun factor. Sound is up next.
Hey!
You know, there really isn't a lot to say here. Music just really isn't a thing here in the climb, and voice work, although done well, is also kept to a minimum. A point I really appreciated is I cannot stand the music festival brotard dynamic that most extreme sport games tend to go with these days, with hosts that sound like they just snorted 3-foot lines of coke before telling you how to handle the game's basic control system. Instead, the climb refreshingly takes the chill approach and lets you simply embrace the ambiance of hanging off a cliff face hundreds of feet in the air. As such, I highly recommend cranking up the volume and letting the sounds of wind gusts and falling rocks just immerse you in a way the limited visuals might not. The ambient world sounds here are truly top-notch, to the point where I would be shocked if the team hadn't captured these sounds in the real-world counterparts to what you're climbing. Here, the 3D audio mix really comes to life and does much heavy lifting for selling you on the fact that you're climbing a cliff face or jumping from one skyscraper to another. For me, the Climb series lives or dies on whether I feel immersed, and here on the audio side of things, the Climb 2 nails it. And that brings me to gameplay. For those new to the series, the Climb 1 and 2 are essentially a collection of some of the best climbing walls you'll ever see, but placed in nature in an effort to really impress. Now, I say climbing walls instead of climbing simulator because the Climb series really is designed to make rock climbing accessible to anyone, regardless of whether they have ever climbed. As such, handholds are clearly marked and routes to the top roughly planned out for you. The objective in the Climb series is a simple one: get to the top as fast as you can and don't fall. And while the Climb 2 may opt to make its courses more accessible, climbing is not as simple as simply grabbing at handholds and following a set path to the top. Cliff faces offer multiple paths along with multiple options within those paths, creating a risk-reward system in the process. This is due largely to the stamina mechanic that sees each of your hands with their own grip strength meter. Holding on with a single hand quickly bleeds you of stamina in that hand, making switching to your other hand so it can regenerate a vital tactic when climbing. In addition, to replicate the real-world security that comes from gripping a ledge with both hands, here in the game, a two-handed grip not only prevents stamina drain, but actually helps to recover it. Additionally, you can leap for ledges that may be high up or far away, and offers some of the game's biggest thrills. This can be accomplished with simply a button push or, my choice, the more immersive option of physically tossing yourself forward with a quick thrust of your arms. Fun as hell to be sure, but a massive drain on your stamina. A mechanic new to the Climb 2 called a half press aims to replicate how a professional climber climbs. For as a new climber, you hold the grips with all your force because you're afraid of falling. However, it's better to know and feel the grip and its angles to grip it the best way you can so that you can use less force. To replicate this aspect, the developers have included the ability to only half press the grip button on each controller as you attempt to find the sweet spot of holding on. In practice, this is actually not easy and often resulted in me letting go of a ledge entirely. However, if you can master this technique, you can climb continuously without draining your stamina meters. That is until you run into breakable grab points or spiked grips, the latter of which drains stamina faster and prevents stamina regen even when holding on with both hands. Now your stamina bar as indicated on each hand is broken into two bracelet parts. The first is a core stamina level and simply drains and refills. The second part of the bracelet, however, once drained is permanently depleted until you are able to chalk a given hand, a task which is crucial in real climbing and is simply accomplished by lightly shaking your free hand. And as chalking essentially doubles your ability to grip, it is a game mechanic you will want to strongly consider, and especially when you're about to do something truly butthole puckering. To be perfectly fair, this really could be called the Climb 1.5, as what is on offer here really isn't much of a departure of what came before, but more of a refinement of worked so well in the first title. The Canyon, Bay, North, and Alps regions from the first all return here in the second, with the city region being the only truly new addition. And while this sense of deja vu in the game's levels is slightly disappointing, the courses themselves do really feel next level, as they make the prior entries' courses feel rather boring in comparison. New this time around is a much heavier focus on path choice, experimentation, and shortcuts. In addition, courses are significantly more varied, not only in appearance but in gameplay, including a multitude of man-made devices such as zip lines, ladders, ropes, just to name a few. An aspect that is doubled down on considerably once you hit the game's new city region, which is littered with all sorts of new man-made obstacles to contend with, including such things as moving elevators and rolling billboards. With 5 regions consisting of 3 levels each of which increase in difficulty as you move to the next, the game doesn't have a ton of content on offer. Unlockables come in the form of new gear, but this is simply cosmetic and really offers little to the gameplay. However, each course features multiple paths and shortcuts lending themselves to be replayed. Replay value here will most certainly be for those who wish to compete on leaderboards, as the Climb 2 certainly lends itself much more than the prior installment to experimentation and daredevil runs in order to shave seconds off your climb. In fact, it is this aspect of the sequel that for me led to some of the best moments in the game, as I would attempt to chuck myself off from ridiculous heights to see if something daring and, well, absolutely stupid was even possible. And it often was, and I loved that playground approach found here that was certainly lacking in the prior title. The climb is played using 2 motion controls and can be played seated or standing with a moderate amount of room. Standing is obviously highly recommended here, but it's not required. This is certainly a workout for your upper body, so for those with any physical limitations, do keep that in mind. Now, typically, this is where I would talk about VR sickness. I don't think that's going to be a huge issue here. However, vertigo and a fear of heights could be. Personally, not a fan of heights here, but here in VR, I found it fun. However, I'm also not someone who finds horror games scary in VR. Maybe I'm just too desensitized to VR, I don't know. Regardless, you don't want to be this person. So make sure you bring your diapies and a spotter. And finally, that brings me to fun factor in my final review. Now, I know I said this game felt more like The Climb 1.5 rather than a full sequel, and I meant that, but I tell you, I had a lot more fun here than in the first game. The Climb 2 simply feels like a more realized version of the first, offering much more of a playground feel to its courses, encouraging experimentation. It's not that this aspect wasn't present in the first, but here everything just feels looser, while at the same time much more refined. For me, it comes down to this. In the first game, I found myself marveling at the visuals, but once the novelty wore off, I simply found myself kind of going through the motions to clear levels. Here in the sequel, I played about 7 hours of it, and I'm actually looking forward to jumping back in. That should tell you a lot. I would like to see this brought to PC VR, as visually the game looks good, but it is held back by the hardware limitations. That being said, I would need to play this with Virtual Desktop on PC to play wireless, for if I had to choose between the first game on PC or the sequel on the Quest, I would easily choose the Quest, as being wireless here in the Climb series really is a game changer, as you truly feel free and, well, more vulnerable, with the cable to the headset actually at times coming off like a safety rope when you're immersed in the game world. As you guys may know, I hate numbered review scores and instead review games on a basis of buy it, burn it, or wait on it. The Climb 2 is certainly a premium VR experience on the Quest platform and offers one of the finest VR experiences available to date. I specifically said experiences, as I think for many the Climb 2, like the first entry, will offer up some wow moments, but not necessarily hook them to want to invest any real time in it. This is must-play VR, but not necessarily must-own. The price here is fair though, and if you love the first, enjoy score chasing, or simply fancy putting yourself and others into a real butthole puckering experience in VR, consider picking this up. As for those who have a PC, I would maybe wait and see what Oculus does once they feel they've squeezed as many new Quest headsets as they can out of this exclusive, as I suspect a PC version is likely incoming and could be worth the wait, for if you've played the PC version of the first Climb, you are likely to be much more sensitive to the visual downgrades here. That being said, the fun factor is here, so maybe the visuals don't matter that much. That's up to you. Anyways, guys, that's it for me. If you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you'd like to see more VR content from me, you guys know the deal. Please consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon so you don't miss any video updates. As always, guys, I'll catch you on my next video.